Good morning to you on Monday morning and welcome to Ben Vicarage on this beautiful, lovely sunny day. Hope you had a lovely weekend. Good to see you this morning and thank you for joining us. By way of our morning notice, may I remind you this coming weekend we have a flower festival. So if you're around Penn on Saturday and Sunday, do come along and join us. It'd be lovely to see the church decked up with flowers for the first time in a couple of years. Come along, bring your friends and come and really appreciate God's creation and also people's God-given creativity too. So flower festival Saturday and Sunday this week. Hope to see you then. We are in the Gospel of Mark and we are in chapter 6 and Jesus has been going around the countryside and so on and he goes home to Nazareth and maybe you had hopes but didn't quite turn out that way. With that in mind, Mark's Gospel chapter 6, I'm going to read you verses 1 to 13. Jesus left that place and came to his hometown and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue and many who heard him were amazed. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What's this wisdom that's been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offence at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honour, except in their hometown and among their own kin and in their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid hands on a few sick people and cured them, and he was amazed at their unbelief. Then he went out among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2, and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals, and not to put on 2 tunics. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. If any place will not welcome you, and they refuse to hear you, as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them." So they went out and proclaimed that they all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So Jesus has been knocking around, preaching around the Galilee area. And he goes to Nazareth, which is his hometown where his family comes from, and which is also around the Galilee area, so it's not very far away. But it's interesting, I don't know what his expectations were on the people's, they think of when he arrived, but it doesn't really go very well. They are appalled by him. And there's a couple of possible reasons why. One is, you might say, familiarity breeds contempt. You know, I knew him, I went to school with him. You almost imagine the kind of thought process, we know his family, that's a sort of familiarity breeds contempt. He can't be the main man. I've brought up with him. You can kind of imagine it. There's also there's a bit of a barbed comment here about, isn't he the son of Mary? Now, interesting. Why isn't he called the son of Joseph, as he would have been? Now, it could be because Joseph had died, but there could be an implication here, casting aspersions on, shall we say, Jesus' parenthood here. There's an implication that he might have, because, born out of wedlock or whatever, there might be some implications there. So there's quite a double comment in there. But either way, they don't receive him. In fact, the word is, and this is, they took offence at him, it's actually stronger than that. The Greek word is scandalizo, from which we get the word scandalised. They were scandalised by this man. They weren't impressed with Jesus at all. And Jesus, how can I say, is astonished at their lack of faith. And then Mark, the writer, says a very interesting and thought-provoking comment. He says, he was astonished at the lack of faith, and he could do no mighty work there. Now, it's interesting, the idea that he could do no mighty work. In Matthew's Gospel, Matthew actually slightly translated in that Matthew says he did no mighty work, because Matthew can't cope with the idea, I think, that Jesus couldn't do anything, because ultimately Jesus can do whatever he likes. So what does it mean when he says that he could do no mighty works there? Interesting enough, he did actually do a few mighty works, which will be a wonderful day for most of us. But what does it mean when he says he could do no mighty works? I mean, why didn't much happen there? I think it goes something like this. God loves us, and God, in his infinite goodness and mercy, prefers to work with us rather than around us. And Jesus, this is very much the case. Jesus wants to cooperate with us rather than do everything for us, if you see what I mean. It requires faith to work with us. So far, everyone who's had something happen to them has done some act of faith. So the woman with the issue of blood comes up to Jesus, comes up in the crowd. Jairus comes to see Jesus. The disciples get into the boat with Jesus. And all these people, they show some faith, and Jesus works with their faith. and does an amazing thing. And here in Nazareth, where you could argue they could have known better, should have known better, because they don't show any faith, he can't really cooperate with their faith. I think that's what it means when he says he could do no mighty works. I don't think it means he physically couldn't. I'm sure Jesus is God. Jesus can do whatever Jesus wants to do, of course, but he didn't do. And because he works with people rather than around them, he wasn't really able to cooperate with them there, and nothing much really happened. And I suppose what this is the challenge to us today is about faith, actually, is about having faith in God. And if we have faith, it's amazing what can happen. And I think this comes out really clearly from this. It's sad that the people in Nazareth, who perhaps should have known better, didn't. But if we have faith, it's amazing what God can do. Which brings us to the second bit of the reading, because you might say this reading is in two halves. You've got this other story where Jesus sends out his disciples 2 by 2 to preach. And sensibly, he sends them out to go and do the things he's been doing, cast out demons, heal the sick, preach the gospel, and that type of stuff. He sends them out to do the things that he's been doing. And there's a lot I could say about this. But the headline is, of course, he sends them out to preach, he sends them out 2 by 2 and so on. But for this morning, I want to focus on one little bit, because we've been talking already about faith, the importance of having faith and being able to cooperate with God. And I think in this second bit, Jesus takes it a bit further, because this rather strange little bit in which he says, don't carry a pack with you, only take one tunic. Don't carry food, don't carry lots of supplies. Now, on one level, it sounds like a bit of recipe for stupidity, because, of course, we should prepare and plans, what's the old Boy Scout motto? Be prepared. And Jesus is almost saying, or almost implies, not to do that. And I think what he means is that I don't think he means we have to be silly about this type of thing, but I do think it means that we have to rely on God. That by not taking the supplies with them, it meant that the disciples were 100% dependent on God. That everything that good came out of it, or whatever, would come from God. And by not carrying supplies, and by relying day-to-day, hand to tooth, you might say, on God each day, we'll be putting their trust in him. And I believe what Jesus is saying very strongly to the disciples here, and actually to us today too, is to put our trust in God. And if we put our trust in God, amazing things can happen. It's interesting, actually, isn't it, that we plan in our lives and we plan in our churches for what we think is going to happen. I wonder, I do believe, generally speaking, in church meetings, we plan as if God's going to not do anything. We plan, we always tend to plan for things as they already are. What are our hopes and expectations on what God's going to do? Do we really believe, in a sense? Do we expect God to be at work in his world? Or do we expect God to do very little? And I think lots of ways here, what this reading is saying here is the disciples are told to put their faith in God. And by not carrying provisions, what he's saying is, remember your utter reliance on God. And finally, there's this little bit at the end, which I think is actually also to do with faith too. He says, if anyone doesn't receive you, shake your dust off your feet as a sign against them. And I think what this means here is, if when they don't receive you, don't carry the hurt around. Leave the hurt behind. Leave the dust behind. Leave the dirt behind. Don't carry the dirt from that time with you. And I think we often do that. We carry around hurts from the past and so on. And I'm not sure it does our faith much good, actually. I think if we can offload our hurts onto God and try very hard not to leave them behind, that will help us in our faith. That we won't be burdened down by constant issues and problems and so on. If we can do what we can to leave some of our problems behind, to lay them at the foot of the cross, to give them to God and leave them with God and leave them behind, it'll deepen our faith rather than holding us back all the time. So this is a passage this morning in two halves, but I believe it's really about faith. God and Jesus work with us, with our faith, which is why he couldn't do much in Nazareth, because although he technically could, he didn't, because he always works with us. And because they hadn't got faith in him, he couldn't work with them, he couldn't do much with them. So that's that. But the second bit reminds us that our total dependence is on God. That actually everything we have, every breath we take, every bit of food we have, every day we enjoy is a day which is being supplied by God. God doesn't just create the world, God sustains us too. He didn't just make us, he keeps us going. And we are completely dependent on him. And this telling them not to carry packs and things was to get them to remind them that they are, and we are, utterly dependent on God. But also, let's remember to keep our faith strong. Let's try our best not to carry around all these hurts and so on from the past. Put them behind us if we can, and put disappointments behind us, and keep our faith strong, and keep believing in God, and keep going with it, and keep our faith. Hope that makes sense. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. God bless you. Have a lovely day.